Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. In this lesson, we'll be analyzing the poem The Hour Is Come by Louisa Lawson. We'll begin with the first stanza, lines 1 till 4. How did she fight? She fought well. How did she light? Ah, she fell. Why did she fall? God, who knows all, only can tell. So the poem begins with a series of rhetorical questions which the speaker poses and then promptly answers them as well. How did she fight? She fought well. How did she light? Ah, she fell. And why did she fall? God knows all, only can tell. So, to light in this context means to settle or land as after flying or falling. So one another meaning to light is to land as well, to land on your feet or to land on your back. Okay, so she landed by meaning that how did she light means that how did she land? Did she land on her feet or did she land on her back? Okay, so these initial questions and the answers of these questions they establish a few pieces of information. Number one, the poem is about an unnamed woman because of the word she who fought well in a battle or on behalf of a cause. Okay, now either it is going to be a battle or any other cause. She ended up falling in the line of duty, whether literally or metaphorically. Okay, whether she failed in her battle metaphorically or literally. So perhaps she was literally killed or seriously injured. Perhaps she was simply defeated. These are the two meanings. One would be the literal meaning of falling, the other one would be the metaphorical meaning of the falling. And the speaker claims not to know why she fell. And he's dismissing the fact, the dismissing the reason for her failure. Okay, now her falling. And he suggests that only God knows the reason behind her uh, defeat, okay, or metaphorical fall. So of course this first stanza leaves a lot unclear until now. The reader doesn't yet know who the woman is and what she was fighting for, why she fell, or even the exact nature of her defeat. Nor is it yet clear who the speaker is, though they seem to admire the woman's fighting spirit and sympathize with her call, at least to some extent. Why? Because of the word ah, she fell. So that ah, she fell sounds like a sigh, okay, as if some sort of a sympathy for that person, for that woman who is fighting somebody's battle. It is also ambiguous at first as to whether there are multiple voices here or just one voice asking and answering their own rhetorical question. However, the lack of dialogue markers favors the latter. Okay, now which one? The rhetorical questions. यानी कि a person, there is one voice who's asking questions and answering those rhetorical questions as well. Why do we get to know? Why don't we think that it is a dialogue? Because of the absence of dialogue markers over here. So whatever the nature of her fight, it is as if they are conducting a post-fight analysis. The fight is done. She has been defeated. She has fallen. Now it is a later commentary, post-fight analysis on it. The title, The Hour is Come, is a small clue in its own right. It echoes several passages from the Gospels in which Jesus anticipates his martyrdom and resurrection. So this biblical allusion, okay, it hints that the fallen woman here may also be a martyr figure, someone who fought well and sacrificed herself on behalf of a noble cause, just like Jesus himself sacrificed himself on behalf of a noble cause. This idea we get because of this biblical allusion. We'll move ahead now. Those she was fighting for, they surely would go to her. Nay, what of her pain? There is the gain ever the way. Those she was fighting for, they surely would go to her. Nay, what of her pain? There is the gain ever the way. This is something in which I would have shared a very personal remark with you guys, but only when we would have been having that class of ours. individual or a private class of us. So I cannot say this over here. Many of you would have understood as well. So those she was fighting for, they surely would go to her. But I mean, this is a question. Okay, so the speaker's rhetorical questions had answers. This continue in the second stanza as well. So here the language takes on a tone of a verbal irony or sarcasm. Okay, the reader learns two main things over here. Okay, where those she was fighting for, they surely would go to her. Nay, what of her pain? There is the gain. So the reader learns two main things over here. First, the woman who fell was fighting for others. The woman who fell, actually, she was fighting for others, not simply for herself. क्या लिखा है? Though she was fighting for, so this wasn't her own battle. She was fighting for others. Okay, not one. Secondly, the people she was fighting for are heartlessly indifferent to her sacrifice, the way numerous people of our nation also heartless to a person who has been sacrificing a lot for them. So, dripping with sarcasm, this is full of sarcasm. The speaker asks, surely these people would help her. Yani कि if this person is fighting for her, and if this person is getting defeated because of them, then surely the people for whom this person is fighting, they would help her. They would go to her in her time of need after all she has done for them? But the answer would be a resounding nay. The speaker mocks the selfish attitude of these passive beneficiaries, ironically exclaiming that there's this the gain, so her pain doesn't matter. यानी कि by the defeat of this woman, who is gaining? The people, the passerbys, they are gaining. Okay, na? They are gaining on behalf of the pain of this person. So, and even if they are gaining because of that person, still they are not going over there to help that person, to assist that person. This is a very sarcastic remark. So, notice how the exclamation point after what of her pain, which both takes the place of a question mark and creates a line interrupting Sijara. And when over here she's saying, wait a minute, what is the point over here? That there is the gain, so her pain doesn't matter. So the exclamation mark after what of her pain, okay? Yani ke that this is kind of a question mark. Yani ke what of her pain? Okay, this is one way of looking at it. Okay, bhai, this person actually fought for this the other people, the passers by, and she is in pain because of them. So what about her pain? Okay, the another way of saying is that in a very sarcastic manner, what of her pain? Okay, so there is the gain ever the way. So one way would be a question. It is serving as an this exclamation mark is serving as a question mark, and with this, it is also creating an interrupting seizure over here, and this adds extra emphasis to the speaker's scornful sarcasm. Okay, so the sarcasm is what of her pain? And who cares about her pain? What of her pain? Who cares about her pain? Nobody cares about her pain. Everybody cares about their own gain, even though it was her pain because of which they gained. So the speaker then adds ever the way, as in that's the way it always is. That's the way it always has been. One person sacrifices, the other people enjoy, nobody cares, and Allah Allah khairs Allah, ever the way. This has always been the case. So it is unclear whether the speaker is still mimicking the others here, as if callously, as if heartlessly saying, hey, that's the line, or he's dropping the sarcasm and saying this line in their normal tone. यानी कि either he is accepting the fact that this is the manner, या फिर he is saying this in a sarcastic tone. In the second case, yani कि if it is saying this in a sarcastic way manner, they would be making a straightforward, non-ironic point. People who selflessly fight for others are always, ever ignored or betrayed by at least some of the people they are fighting for. Okay, this has been the case. So it is still not clear who this particular woman was fighting for, but since the poet was a noted feminist, one of the most important of the Australian women's suffrage movement. What is the suffrage movement? Suffrage movement was the right to vote movement. She was one of the most important figures of the Australian women suffrage movement. Okay, na, in which the women fought for their right to vote, and that was around 20th century. So the poem sympathetic portrayal of a she fighting for others is a major clue. Generally, the R is come is read as a commentary on the feminist struggles of the time. Let us move ahead with this. So, will they not help her to rise if there is death in her eyes? Can you not see? She made them free. What if she dies? Okay, so in these lines, the speaker continues asking pointed rhetorical questions about the people the woman was fighting for. Again, the speaker's tone combines resentment and sarcasm. He feels resentment over here on the behalf of the woman, and his tone is sarcastic as well. Sarcastic, why? Because it is directed at the ungrateful people she has held. Will they not help her to rise if there is death in her eyes? Okay, and can you not see she made them free? What if she dies? So this last question means, so what if she dies? Yani ke, it isn't what if she were to die. Okay, it is, so what if she dies? So what if she dies? Okay, not what if she were to die. Okay, na? So in other words, the speaker is again mocking the callous and heartless attitude of the people by she made them free, na. That's what the people wanted. Now whether she dies or lives, we don't care. So she made them free. Though the poem never says outrightly who these people are, she made them free, offers the biggest clue here. The fallen woman was clearly involved in some sort of liberation struggle, sacrificing herself to free people, herself included perhaps, who were politically subjugated and oppressed. Okay, yani ke when she is struggling and sacrificing herself to free people, she might also be included in those people. Okay, na? So, but there are others as well who she is fighting for. Okay, na? Who are these people who she is fighting for? That can be herself as well. They are the ones who were politically subjugated and oppressed. And these women in the suffrage movement, they were politically oppressed and subjugated. So she has waged that battle to the point of death. But even though she has now fallen and fighting for her life, none of the people she is freed will help her to rise. They got what they needed out of her with cynical irony. So why would they care what happens to her now? अपना काम तो हो गया, चलो निकलो. So as a prominent feminist of her day, Louisa Lawson may be using these lines to criticize false friends और indifferent observers और her own political movement. जैसे कि आजकल के दौर में you can say the same thing for our media, for our judiciary, for other organizations as well. So यानी कि they are indifferent observers. They are observing, not sometimes they are commenting, sometimes they are not. None of them are actually delivering the clear picture, or they have the guts to say the actual thing. That is, she may be protesting women who benefit from the feminist struggle, but still betrayed or failed to help those who sacrificed the most for it. Okay, so she may even be drawing another parallel with the Gospels in keeping with the elusive title. After all, Jesus was famously betrayed by Judas. Okay, so more broadly, Lawson is critiquing bystanders who accept the gains that activists or freedom fighters, etc., achieve on their behalf but offer no assistance in return. Lines 13 till 16. Can we not help her? Oh no. In her good fight, it is so that all who work never must shirk suffering and woe. Okay. So these lines bring somewhat an unexpected twist. Posting a last rhetorical question, the speaker asks, can we not help her? So, given the speaker's obvious sympathy for the fallen women and sarcastic mockery of those who fail to help her, the reader might expect the answer to be a resounding yes. Yes, we should. Can we not help her? Yes, we should help her. This might be the answer everyone would be expecting. Instead, it is, oh no, a near echo of the nay, just like nay was said in line 6. That's the same representation of that nay over here. Oh no, that's not needed, that's not required. So even the speaker won't or perhaps can't help the woman in her hour of need. Okay, na? The speaker who is saying this, that person also cannot help the woman in her hour of need. The speaker explains the reason that unfortunately this is the nature of the work the woman has taken on. Okay, in her fight, it is so that all work who never must shirk suffering and woe. This is the nature of her war, of her work, of her battle. So, in other words, this is what it means to fight the good fight on behalf of justice. Rather than enthusiastic help from others, or glory of any kind, one can expect suffering and woe. And if the person has gone to this kind of work, giving a good fight, that person must never expect enthusiastic help from others. That person must never expect any sort of glory of any kind. But the one thing that that person must expect is suffering and woe. Pain becomes a kind of duty that the activist, the freedom fighter can shirk or avoid. Yani ke, when the freedom fighter, when the activist is going in that situation, if he's going in that battle, then he must be aware of all the outcomes. He must be aware that pain will be inflicted upon him. Okay, na? He must be aware, he must understand that he must be capable enough to shirk or avoid the pain which he's going to get in that work which he's doing, even though if he's doing it for others. So this stanza introduces some ambiguity in terms of the speaker's position and views. Again, throughout the rest of the poem, the speaker seems supportive of the fallen woman and her cause. Perhaps there is a valid reason why they can't help in her current crisis. If so, the poem doesn't fully explain it. तो क्या मतलब है? इसका मतलब ये है that throughout the rest of the poem, the speaker seems supportive of the fallen woman and her cause. But over here, he has a valid reason. There is a valid reason that he cannot help over here in this current crisis. Okay, na? Because if the person is going to help uh, the freedom fighter or the activist, according to this helper, that might not go well with the activists. That's what the understanding is of the observers. So, on the other hand, perhaps the speaker is displaying a little hypocrisy of his own over here, and he is rationalizing it by declaring that woe is simply a part of activism. Yani ke this speaker, who throughout the poem until now, he seemed to be, because he was sarcastic, so when he was passing ironical and sarcastic remarks, it felt that he is the supporter of this person. But now, when there is time for him to support this person, he is also not, and this suggests that he is a hypocrite. And with the speaker trying to hide or cover his hypocrisy, is trying to rationalize his decision of not helping that activities by declaring that woe and pain and suffering is simply the part of activism. Okay, with this, we're going to move ahead to the final stanza. But she'll not ever lie down. On her head, in the dust, is a crown jeweled and bright, under whose light she'll rise alone. So, after a series of irony and sarcasm filled stanzas, lines 17 till 20 offer a straightforward tribute to the woman's heroic persistence. The imagery of this stanza is charged with symbolism. क्या है भाई? But she will not ever lie down. On her head, in the dust, is a crown jeweled and bright, under whose light she'll rise alone. So the fallen woman, who herself seems symbolic of feminists or activists and freedom fighters in general, turned out to be fallen only temporary. If the person has fallen on the ground, that is temporary. That's what the speaker is suggesting. She will not ever lie down. It echoes the familiar idiom about refusing to take defeat lying down. Yani कि if she has fallen down, if she has been defeated, she is not going to stay on the ground for a longer while. She's going to stand up. So this woman has too much energy, passion, and vitality to accept permanent defeat. Though there was previously a look of death in her eyes, she appears to be alive after all. Or perhaps she is a goddess figure who will be resurrected after death. In both the conditions. Yani कि if that defeat is literal, then she is going to be resurrected as a goddess figure after that. If that is metaphorical, then that is not going to stay for a longer while. She is going to stand back. She has enough energy and passion and vitality left in her that she's not going to accept the permanent defeat, which completely fits on one of the figures in our nation as well. So either way, glory awaits her, both metaphorically and literally, both the scenarios. Glory awaits her. कहते हैं ना कि भाई मर गए तो क्या शहीद और जान बच गई तो गाजी. Okay, so in both the scenarios, there is glory for the fighter. So the speaker promises that she will rise again. Though she seems humbled for now, lying in the dust, she is wearing a jeweled crown that symbolizes victory, power, and authority at all once. So perhaps it even symbolizes divine power as an extension of the biblical allusions. To compare, for example, this passage from Hebrews 2 by 9 as translated in King James Version, kya? But we see Jesus crowned with glory and honor, that he, by the grace of God, should taste death for everyone. So, in this reading, the poem's heroine, a cry is a Christ-like martyr for every woman. Perhaps she will rise from the death or defeat, radiating the bright light of divinity her crown imparts on her. So, alternatively, the speaker could be describing a non supernatural triumph. Perhaps the woman will simply dust herself off after falling down. She will stand up, she will dust herself off, and then she will begin the fight again. So, however she rises, she will rise alone. But there is one thing to tell this freedom fighter, this activist, that she has been alone, she will always be alone in this battle of earth. This word marks a bittersweet ending to the poem. There is a suggestion that since the sacrifice was hers alone, the ultimate glory or divine reward will be hers alone as well. At the same time, even her moment of triumph is solitary. Her moment of triumph is also solitary. She has no one to share the victory with, just as she had no one fighting beside her. All in all, the poem implies or warns that the activist's path is a hard and solitary one, though glorious and honorable in the end, in both literal and metaphorical sense. The themes over here are struggle, sacrifice, and redemption, and feminism and liberation. So, struggle, sacrifice, and redemption. Louisa Lawson's The Hour is Come describes a bitter but ultimately liberating struggle. The unnamed heroine of this struggle selflessly fights for others' freedom, yet receives no help and sees no gain herself. She dies in the end, yet she has not been a failure. Her work made others free, and the speaker imagines the woman rising alone after death with a Christ like crown on her head. So, struggles for justice demand lonely self sacrifice, the poem implies. But those who pursue this difficult path will be rewarded with a moral victory in the end. There is this implication that she will receive a heavenly reward as well. In fact, the poem's title alludes to several of Jesus' sayings in the Gospel. So it positions the woman as a Christ like martyr. The second theme over here is feminism and liberation. The poem can be read as both a realistic portrait of feminist struggle and an idealistic statement of defiance. Number one, realistic portrait of feminist struggle and an idealistic statement of defiance. The women will be free. Okay, and it seems to declare that no matter how much pain and death the fight requires, the woman will be free. So, though the poem never specifies who or what its heroine fought for, it strongly implies that she was working for the liberation of women. She is identified only by gender and characterized only by her unconquerable will to fight. यानी कि she is undefeatable. Okay ना? यानी कि she is unconquerable. Nobody can conquer her. If she is defeated, that's only temporary. She will rise again. As a result, the poem seems to elevate her to a symbol of women activists or feminists in general. The poem at first seems to mourn a defeat, yet ultimately guarantees a victory, and in doing so, warns anyone who might stand in the way of feminist progress. The poem hints that no matter how many people betray the cause and no matter how much sacrifice the cause requires, women's liberation will win the day. The symbols happen to be the crown. The crown in the final stanza is a symbolic crown of victory. It is not the literal crown, it is symbolic crown of victory. The speaker claims that the hero herself, a symbol of womanhood and feminism, died wearing this crown and will rise alone with its light shining around her. So, in other words, she was royal even in defeat. She was royal even in defeat. And her defeat was only temporary. She, and by extension feminism, she and she, whatever she's representing, that is feminism, will triumph in the end, rising from the dust with majestic dignity. The themes of, sorry, the poetic devices and figurative language. The first one is repetition. Okay, so repetition highlights several of the poem's most thematically important words. It also contributes to the poem's logical, easy to follow structure. There is anaphora over here, there is parallelism over here. How did she fight? She fought well. How did she light? Ah, she fell. Okay, so the simple repetitive structure of rhetorical questions and answers continue throughout the first four stanzas. It provides explanation about the commentary on the heroine's struggle with while giving the poem a logical and predictable flow. It also structures the poem as a kind of insistent inquiry into the fallen heroine, as though her community were fascinated by her and buzzing about what happened to her. Then we moved on to the rhetorical question. We've already discussed rhetorical questions. We've already discussed irony. Caesar. Yes, the poem contains numerous Caesars, many of which are punctuated by question marks. In other words, the speaker has a habit of ending questions mid-line, then using the rest of the line, the following line, to answer those questions. So this is the effect. This is the rationale for the Caesars over here. Then allusion. We've talked about allusion. The biblical allusions present over here. With this, we're going to move on to form, meter, and the rhyme scheme of this poem. So the R is come consists of five rhymed quatrains. Okay na? Quatrains are four-line stanzas with an unusual structure. क्या structure है भाई? It uses dactylic meter. Okay, we have read Spondy, we've read Anapest, we've read Iambic, we and we have also read dactylic. Okay na? What is dactyle meter or dactylic meter? Dactylic meter is the one which is stress, okay, unstress, unstress, and stress. Okay, so stress, unstress, unstress, stress, unstress, unstress. That's the rhythm of tactile, and this is quite rare in English language poetry. And its rhyme scheme includes internal rhyme. So form के अंदर हमने क्या बात कर ली? Five rhymed quatrains. Meter is dactylic, यानी कि stressed, unstressed, unstressed, and the rhyme scheme includes internal rhyme in the third line of each stanza. So this form is highly constrained and difficult, and it is also very much distinctive. There is no traditional name for it. Lawson is pretty much paving her own way over here, and that's part of the point. As a feminist activist, Lawson seems to be rejecting the conventional tools of the English poetic tradition, which in 1905 was still overwhelmingly male dominated. So she has come up with her own form, and this form is a very difficult one, not abiding by the rules of the convention. Therefore, it suggests that the battle, the struggle of feminism, of activism is going to be very hard, very tough. Okay. Okay, so the meter. So as it has been already been suggested that the meter over here is dactyl. Okay, that the meaning that its syllables are generally arranged in a stressed, unstressed rhythm. The number of dactylic feet in each line varies. The first two lines of each stanzas are dactylic trimeter. Okay, and then the last line of each stanza is dactylic diameter, only 2 feet, as in only can tell. Okay, only 2 feet over here. So Lawson seems to want to make the poem formally unconventional and challenging. After all, it is about a lonely nonconformist hero who fights a hard fight. The dactyls give the language a galloping rhythm, but this rhythm is frequently interrupted by line breaks and caesuras, so that the language, like the hero herself, seems to drive forward in the face of obstacles. Rhyme scheme. The basic rhyme scheme of each stanza, each quatrain is double A, B A, A A, and B A. Okay, A A, B A, sorry, A A, B A. So the full rhyme scheme is A A, B A, C C, D C, E E, F E, and etc. However, the third line of each quatrain also contains an internal rhyme. Just look at the third line. Okay, na? कैसे भाई? Why did she fall? God who knows all. So there is an internal rhyme scheme. So in other words, it would be possible to write out each stanza so that the rhyme scheme read A A B B A. Okay na? A A B B A if we are going to include the internal rhyme as well. So Lawson's scheme instead maximizes the contrast between the longer third line with its internal B rhymes and the shorter fourth line which brings the A rhyme back. The contrast give each stanza a punchy ending. So the speaker represents a community of onlookers who admire and sympathize with but don't actually assess the heroine. They cue the reader to share their pity and admiration, but through their inability or unwillingness to help her, they also illustrate the loneliness of the heroine's struggle. The setting of the poem. The setting. The poem never mentions a geographical or historical setting. This lack of specifics gives a symbolic universal quality to the heroine's fight. Yani कि this fight is not the fight of one region, okay? But it can be the fight for the complete ideology of freedom anytime and anywhere. The physical setting may be some sort of battlefield, though again this would be more symbolic than literal. The heroine has fallen in the dust as though wounded or killed in battle. She is wearing a jeweled crown like a monarch fighting on the battlefield, as happened in many historical wars. But if the poem is read as an allegory for feminist struggle, the kind Louisa Lawson waged in real life, the actual implied setting is the political battlefield on which women fight for their rights. With this, we're going to move on to the literary context. Okay, so Louisa Lawson was a poet, independent publisher, political essays, and one of the leading Australian feminists of the late 19th and early 20th century. The R is come appears in her only volume of poetry, the self-published collection, The Lonely Crossing and Other Poems. The name of the collection is The Lonely Crossing and Other Poems. In her preface to the collection, Lawson dedicated her work expressly to her countrywomen. So, in addition to her literary writing, Lawson published and contributed political essays to feminist magazine The Dawn. In one representative essay called The Need of the Hour, Lawson attacks the kind of moral passivity she criticizes in her poem The Hour is Come. So, in the article The Need of the Hour and the poem is The Hour is Come, ideology is the same, the critical analysis is the same. Historical context. Lawson was a major Australian figure in what is known as a first wave feminism. Okay, now the feminist and women's suffrage movements that swept much of the world in the late 19th and the early 20th century. This decades long struggle focused mainly but not exclusively on voting and property rights. A broader fight against patriarchal institutions, including unequal workplaces, began with the second wave of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. Lawson's role in the movement took various forms. She founded and published The Dawn, Australia's first magazine produced solely by women. Lawson also founded the Dawn Club, a feminist discussion group that became instrumental to Australia's suffrage movement and advocated for trade unionism, temperance, yani ke alcohol prohibition, and other reforms. She was publicly credited as the leading force behind the 1902 Womanhood Suffrage Bill, which secured women's right to vote in her home state of New South Wales. Due to Lawson's lifelong activism, the R is come is usually read as an allegory about the feminist fight, including the lonely heroism of its leaders and the hypocrisy of those who benefited from but did not join in. With this, we are going to end this lesson. I hope you understood it. And if there are any questions, please feel free to ask.